So, while I'm here, it's Dementia Awareness Week, and I think I want to say something about dementia. My mum's been cared for this week in Lambhill Court Nursing Home, and that just happens to be the school my mum first attended 66 years ago when she was 5. When I was down there last night, I thought about my mum getting in the doors of that as a school 60 years ago. And you go to school to learn and absorb information, and you meet new friends, you discover love, you discover hate, you discover the moon, the sun and the stars. Then you go to high school and you meet new friends, you lose friends, and you keep educating yourself and you absorb all of this and you take it in and it builds you into the person you are. Then you go out and you get a job and you work hard. And for every pair of shoes you've got, you give your children 2 pair. And for every jacket you've got, you buy your children 2 jackets. And you meet a man and you fall in love with him. And you love him for 44 years and you nurse him when he's dying. And your heart is broken when you lose that man. And then 66 years later, your son takes you back through the same doors of the school that you attended. And you forgot every single bit of that 66 years. And that's the tragedy of dementia. My mum doesn't remember all those good points, bad points, happy points, sad. And she can't remember my dad, the man she loved for 44 years. And that's the most heartbreaking thing about this illness. So I just want to say that, and that's my wee mum, the hardest working wee woman I've ever met in my life. But my wee mum's the same as 80,000 other people who are struggling with dementia and people who are caring for them.
Film was made for a very specific reason, and I hope it's not a film about Scotland. I just have to say, I only had a week. If I could have walked further, I would have walked to the end of Britain that week to collect letters, but I only had a week, and that's as far as I could walk. I just want to say a couple of wee things about the film. But when someone you've never met in your life, and you go down to your letterbox one day and you open up a letter and it says, I wake up every day and I look at the future ahead of me and I think, just forget it. Not as a room or a hospital or as a trust, but as a society, we fail each other if that's how we allow our fellow citizens to wake up every day thinking that I have no future. But in collecting the letters and the reason for this campaign, the reason for this tour about asking people to make a difference, 2 sisters got in touch with me and asked if I could come and visit them, that their story was so dreadful that they didn't want to just post it or email it to me. They asked if I could come to their house and collect it. And I got the train through. They stayed in a place called Falkirk, about 40 miles outside Glasgow. And I got the train through during my respite hours one day to visit them, to collect this letter. And I knocked on their door. And when the door opened, the first sister was so angry and furious and agitated that when that door opened, you would have thought she was ready for a fight. But she was really none of those things. She was just really scared of what was happening to the mum that she loved. And the other sister couldn't lift her head up. And when she lifted her head up, you didn't have to ask her a single question. You only had to look in her eyes and you could see her heart was absolutely broken. In fact, I sat in their house for an hour and a half that day, and the second sister never said a word. She cried the whole time I was there, and I had no clue what to say or what to do. And I sat down with them, and on their kitchen table was a massive correspondence. Letter after letter after letter of fights and arguments and disagreements with the hospital about the care or lack of care for someone's mum. Letter after, including 2 lawyers, a lawyer for the family and a lawyer for the hospital. 157 letters in total. And I don't think it takes 157 letters to care for someone. I don't think it takes 157 letters to get it right or wrong. It just takes you and I to care for and about each other. It just takes you and I to care about the people that we meet every day. And I won't go into the details of the story because it's a bit too dreadful to speak about. But I sat with them that day and I said, you know, I'm hopefully going to make a wee film and I'm going to go to Parliament, and I would love you to come with me and share your experience. I wanted to invite 20 families who'd sent me letters to come with me that day. And they said they would come with me. And I walked out their house that day thinking, I am those 2 sisters. Some days I wake up and I'm so angry at dementia and what it's doing to my mum that I want to scream. And other days I'm so agitated and scared that I really don't know how to think. But most days I just want to lie in my bed and cry all day because I have no clue how to help my mum who's in the room next door to me. And most days I'm all of those things in the one day. I'm angry and I'm scared and I'm agitated, but I always cry myself to sleep because I feel hopeless and helpless. I am those 2 sisters. And I travelled home. And about 4.5 months later, a wee letter popped through my door. And it was one of the most beautiful letters you could ever wish to read. It was full of thanks and joy and kindness and admiration from the same 2 sisters, about the same mum, about the same hospital. And the only difference in this letter from the 157 on their kitchen table was one single person, was a different consultant. Same mum, same 2 sisters, same hospital in the hands of a different person. And I think he's brilliant. I think that's a wonderful person to be, that can turn a table full of tragedy and heartbreak and fear and no understanding back into a love story. He's one of the reasons why my campaign is called You Can Make a Difference. And if I was to show you both those letters 4.5 months apart, you would never believe they were about the same mum, about the same hospital, from the same 2 sisters. And I think he's great. And I hope you are that consultant. I hope it's who you were yesterday to the people you worked beside, to the beds you stood beside, to the people who you walked past in the corridor, or the people whose doors you knocked in at their own home. I hope it's who you want to be today, and I truly hope it's who you want to be tomorrow. Because the biggest difference for the care and the people that we meet every day doesn't come from policies or strategies. It comes from the people sitting in this room on these seats today. You are the biggest difference of all. It's always about people. And that was the same in caring for my mum. It was people that brought a smile to her day or her heart, or it was people who left us in tears. It was people who sat beside my mum's bed when she was in hospital, and I thought, I'm so glad I met you today. I'm so glad you walked up to this bedside, because we understand a little bit more. But it was also people who walked away from my mum's bed when she was in hospital, or walked out her front door. It left us feeling helpless and hopeless. I came back in 2007 for my mum to give me a cuddle and maybe even give me any trouble for messing up and do these wonderful things that our mums do for us. And within 5.5 years, my mum was unable to walk, unable to talk, unable to swallow, unable to recognise her son standing beside her bed, or the man she met one day and fell in love with by photograph or even in discussion, or the environment that she lived in, or decide where she wanted to go, or all the things that we've all done today in order to get here, what we'd like to wear, who we'd like to sit beside, what we'd have for our lunch, or even who she would like to invite in through the front doors of her own home. And every time those changes came, they knocked us on our knees. Just when we thought we'd found a way of getting through each day or a routine, we'd wake up and dementia had changed everything. Things that we thought we could do or achieve the day before, we could no longer do them. It was full of forever moments. It was 5.5 years of watching little things go. And that comes from the day when you walk in at your mum's room and she's sitting brushing her hair, and you walk in the next morning, your mum doesn't know how to brush her own hair again, and she'll never do that again. Or decide all these things that we've all done. Every time they happened, they left us struggling to where do we start? Yesterday we knew how to do this, we could do this together. Today we have to start from here. We had to keep starting from a new position. And I got up one day to give my hard-working, dignified mum her breakfast and medication. And my mum had had an accident in her bed. And in one overnight sleep, my mum was doubly incontinent. And it was that quick. And I knew it was forever. The second it happened, I knew it was forever, because I'd spent 5 years watching things always be forever. In fact, my mum never ever asked to go to the toilet ever again. And I really didn't know what to do. Before that, we stumbled through it. I would put my mum's clothes out in the order she wore them, but always looking away so I wouldn't see things that she might not like me to see, or things that I might not like to see. If my mum went to the bathroom, I would sit against the bathroom door and talk my mum through how to do it, but always looking away to protect her dignity, or in fact our basic human rights to be treated with kindness, dignity and respect. We all deserve that. But I knew I couldn't do that. But I knew another thing, that my mum shouldn't sit like that for 1 single second. No person, whether in their own home or in a hospital or residential care, should be left to sit like that for a second. We walk past that, we have just failed the person we walk past. All my mum ever tried to do all her life was do her best. She got up every day and worked and tried to do her best for her family and her friends. And I wanted my mum to be at her best every day, but I really didn't know what to do. And I thought, if I get the bath and I fill it up with enough bubbles and I keep my eyes closed, I'll be able to undress my mum and get her in the bath, and I won't see anything that I shouldn't see. Because if I could ask my mum a question at that point, how do you feel about me seeing you in such a private, intimate, personal position? What would her answer have been? And a question that nobody's ever asked me, how did I feel about seeing my mum in such a private, personal, intimate position? And I really hope that's a question you ask every bed you walk towards or every door you knock on. How do you feel about me doing that for you? Are you okay with me doing that to you? If we think we can just walk up and do it because we think we can, we might just have failed the person we've done it for. I hope that question's in your heart every single time. Are you okay with me doing this for you? I think it's dead important. And with my eyes closed and through the tears, I got my mum in the bath, and I got her favourite shampoo that day. Because I wanted my mum's hair to smell beautiful. I knew that if my mum could make a decision and reach her own arm out that day, she would have chosen her favourite shampoo, so she was at her best. When I came back in 2007, I knew I was home. When that door opened and my mum gave me a cuddle, I could smell her beautiful hair, and I knew I was back in a safe place. In fact, for the 20 years before that, every time I came back to Glasgow, there'd be a big pot of soup on, and my mum would drag me in the door, and I would smell her beautiful hair, and I would think, I'm home. And I wanted my mum to win. This is what mattered to my mum, and I wanted us to be the best we could. And I got my mum out with her nice pyjamas on and her hair the way she liked it, and settled down and sat downstairs in despair again. Out of the good days and the bad days and the days we smiled or cried, this was a dreadful day. Am I able to do this? Am I hurting my mum? If I could ask my mum, what do you think about me doing this? What would her answer be? All these things that I really didn't have the answers to. And I phoned up that day for an incontinence nurse to come and give us help. But I was told it's June and 2 are off sick and 2 are on holiday, and you're not the only person who needs help today. And I don't think there's any dignity in such a conversation with a husband or a wife or a son or a daughter when the person they love become incontinent. We can do much better. I was then told that if I phoned up at 8 o'clock every morning and complained enough, we'd get pushed up the queue and someone would come and see us quicker. But I refused to do that because my mum wasn't a cheat. And the decisions I made had to be based on the life that my mum led. This was Joan Whitelaw's life. And my mum would have been dead angry at me if she thought we stole someone else's chance to be treated with kindness, dignity and respect. She was always saying, make sure such and such is okay, make sure you're okay. She was always looking out for other people. And I didn't want to let her down. She'd have been dead angry at me. But we sat there waiting for day after day after day after day for an incontinence nurse to knock on our door. And every time my mum had an accident, we went through the same routine of the bubbles and my eyes closed and the tears and not knowing, am I hurting my mum, am I doing it right? But I could see my mum was getting sore. She was incontinent and I wanted her to be safe. Every one of us has a right to be kept safe, whether it's our home or hospital, wherever we may be. Every one of us in this room has that right. And I wanted my mum to be safe. And I phoned the GP to tell him that we'd been waiting weeks for someone to come in the situation we were in. And at first he tried to tell me the same story about people being off sick and people being on holiday. And I told him I didn't want to hear that. Could he just get me one person to show me what to do? I didn't even want them to do it for me. If they could just come and show me that I was doing it right. And he said he would get a district nurse to come and visit us on the Thursday to give us tips and advice. And I knew she was coming at 1 o'clock, and I thought at 12:30 I'll get my mum in the bath and I'll get her all ready, because when I was a wee boy I get flung in the bath before I went to the doctors or the hospital. You had to be at your best out of respect for yourself, but also for the person who was going to examine you. And I wanted, when that district nurse leaned over to undress my mum, that she would smell her beautiful hair. And she would think, every time I meet you, Joan, your hair must smell beautiful. And every time I walk away from this bed, your hair must smell beautiful, because it must really matter to you. It must be important. I wanted to set a standard with the right help and a little bit of support that we could continue to achieve for the rest of my mum's life. And while I was bathing my mum, the door went and it was the district nurse. She'd arrived early. And I shouted her up the stairs to say I was holding my mum, could she please come up? And as I heard her walking up the stairs, I cried louder than I've ever cried in my life before, because I wanted her to hear how scared and lost that I was. I wanted someone to know that I really didn't have a clue what I was doing that day. And that bathroom door opened and she just took one look at the two of us. And at first she never said a word. She then put her hand on my shoulder and told me I was doing a great job of caring for my mum. The first person in nearly 4 years to say such a sentence. And I felt better the second she said it. I felt someone maybe understood where we were. And she knelt down quietly and she introduced herself to my mum. And she showed me how to lift my mum, and she showed me how to wash my mum. Then she showed me how to dry my mum like a lady. Because I'm sure my mum always dried herself like a lady when she was able to do that for herself. And she helped me get my mum settled, and she said, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that, and we're going to organise a hospital bed that moves up and down, and I'm going to do all these things. then I'm going to knock on your door every Friday just to make sure you two are okay. One of the single greatest sentences that Andy's ever said to me in my life, for me mattered. I'm going to come here every Friday just to make sure you're okay. And she's one of the reasons why my campaign's called You Can Make a Difference. As she walked up those stairs, we were scared and lost and falling apart. And 45 minutes later, when she walked back down them, we were less scared. We weren't falling apart, and we thought we might just be able to do this. And if I met that district nurse today, I would cross the street and tell her thank you for doing that for my mum. And if I saw her again tomorrow, I would cross the street again and shake her hand again and tell her thank you for making our lives better. And I have to tell you something about her. She didn't even know she was doing it. She was just being a great nurse. See, that's what great doctors and great nurses and great care assistants and great colleagues and great people do. They meet us at our most vulnerable. In one way or another, they put a hand on our shoulder and they help us understand. And I hope you are that district nurse. I hope that's who you were to the people who you met yesterday, whose beds you sat beside, or you met in the corridor, or you even sit facing in your office. I hope it's who you want to be today, and I truly hope it's who you want to be tomorrow. And we might not always say thank you. You might walk away from our bedside or out our front door, and in amongst maybe the heartbreak we forgot to say thank you. But we will never ever forget you. When I look back at my mum's life and the good times and the bad times, and sometimes feeling sorry for myself, I have a good old cry. Every time I cry, I smile.